Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with Portland-based, Philly-born, Puerto Rican-reared producer and multi-instrumentalist Brown Calvin. Unconventionally rhythmic structures, improvisation, jazz harmony, and Rhodes-soaked psychedelic soundscapes are woven together with samples, synths, and found sounds to create his debut album, Dimensions Perspective. He creates a pulsing, winding Afro-Latin-futuristic music. So he was born into a family of musicians and artists. His parents were constantly listening to jazz, Latin, folk, and classic rock, while his siblings introduced him to hip-hop, reggae, and Afrobeat. He's got a great background. Dig this interview.
Hey, man, good. Thanks for being patient. I appreciate it.
No worries.
How's everything going in your corner of the world? Are you in Philly?
I'm in Portland.
Okay, you're in Portland. Okay.
Yeah, I was born in Philly, raised over there.
Cool, man. Well, you got a lot going on in your life. There's a whole lot of things going on. You got a new single out. Talk to me a little bit about, now that COVID restrictions are easing, it's warm outside. How does it feel to have new material out and ready to go?
Feels good. It's definitely a transition, and it's interesting with the waves going around, and then still sort of affecting turnout here and there when you have, and just like people having to back out of shows and stuff like that. But ultimately, it's been good. It's like a new awakening, a new chapter in a couple different ways for me and my family. So it's definitely lined up. Feeling good. So
it's a new single on a forthcoming project. Talk to me a little bit about how you artistically orchestrated the sound and kind of what the vision was for this project.
It was a collaboration with the artist who did the album art, and we wanted to sort of approach the album in a way that was collaborative because I worked on it in isolation in the pandemic, wasn't working with other musicians very much. So we sort of met on the porch a bunch, just discussed a bunch of concepts relating to creation, sort of like really deep concepts like creation of the universe and from scientific perspectives or religious perspectives, and breaking down sort of just perspective and how that relates to, the universe around us that we build, and then how that relates to the actual external world that is around us, and sort of just mining the depth there. And we sort of fed off of each other just in just exchanging it as it was being created. A lot of his ideas helped to sort of articulate. I try to approach things with my music in an improvisational sort of a way that allows for some spontaneity to get in there. So those were some of the things that I was definitely processing and thinking about, and I think that he was getting from the music, which inspired the art as well. And so, yeah, it's just a lot of sampling of instruments from around the house, some of my baby's toys, some percussion stuff, a lot of layering of keys and different synths, and experimenting with different effects chains and just all kinds of different sounds.
That's true improv, man. Pulling everything in that's in your environment for sure.
Yeah, totally.
So questions of, origin and the universe and cosmos and things that are along those lines, did that get deeper for you because of COVID? Did you kind of probe more into that realm of thought because of that, or was this just something that you were already kind of, inclined towards, or this is just kind of your thing?
Mm-hmm. Generally, like I've always been kind of, it's always been something that I've been sort of into, but definitely COVID was a big catalyst for just having so much time to reflect. Me and my partner is also an artist, and so basically we also had a baby towards the beginning of the pandemic, and so our lives were totally shifted from what we were, used to. No shows, and basically our work life had totally changed. And so, there was a lot of time to sort of reflect. And then there was also sort of course, becoming a parent that's like that creation story thing was sort of on the tip of my mind. And yeah, just each of the artists I was working with was going through a lot of personal changes and grief that he was dealing with. And so yeah, it was definitely a good time for those ideas to come through. But there had always been stuff that we had been tinkering with and talking about here and there, anyway. So it's a little of both, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of had this little offshoot idea when the pandemic started in earnest in March and April that around that time, those that were, making babies, I was thinking, and along the line, have you watched Stranger Things?
No, I haven't. I haven't gotten to check it out.
Well, I guess my idea is more Spielberg than anything else, but I was thinking there could be a concept for a show called The COVID Kids, and the kids that were born during the pandemic could be the ones that would have superior intellect because they were in the womb when everybody was home, so they heard more voices. And as you know, the more music and the more voices they hear when they're in the womb, it's comfort, and it makes their intellect better. So I'm thinking if we have that legion of kids that grow up, maybe they could come up with like the absolute antidote to any more pandemics on the planet.
Yeah, totally.
So
I like that.
something along those lines. So
yeah.
I'm curious, how did this journey begin for you? Talk to me a little bit about your roots, and you talked about being from Philadelphia. Kind of give me an idea how, the creative clause and music came into your life.
I was born into an artistic family, and my parents were both musicians that sort of didn't allow themselves to pursue it professionally, but they were both very connected to music. And all my siblings are actually visual artists. So there was a lot of music playing, a lot of art, a lot of going to art galleries and that kind of thing when I was growing up. I took piano lessons when I was a kid, but it didn't really vibe with me. Just the structure of the method I was learning just didn't really. I'm more of a person who likes to learn. I kind of have like a math brain as far as like I like to see how the pieces fit together to put it together myself, as opposed to just learning songs and specifically in the way that they were written and then playing them back in that specific way. So I kind of quit piano, was into hip hop growing up in Philly, and then I moved to Puerto Rico when I was about 19. And when I was applying for college, I was supposed to choose my major, and I didn't know what to choose. And my sister basically told me to put a check mark next to everything that interested me. So I put check marks next to the stuff, and she's like, you put check marks next to all the music programs. And so it was a little hard to wrap my head around starting to study music essentially at the college level in a foreign language. But she convinced me to start there, and then from there, it just pulled me in. And when I moved to Portland, I got a lot more serious. Went to PCC and was a lot more serious about practicing and being disciplined about it. And from there, met a bunch of people, started playing in a couple different bands around town. And the whole time I had been making my own stuff. As far as like originally, it was I was writing rhymes and stuff and trying to make beats for myself. It evolved into its own thing, and I got less interested in the like hip hop component. And then as I performed more with other people, I started to just realize how different the process was of like making my own music to like collaborating with other musicians, and wanted to figure out a way to sort of hybridize that. And I started working with these other beat makers around town, mainly Alex Meltzer and Omari Jazz. And we were basically with me and Alex, it started with just we would choose a sample and we would make a beat together, sort of. But then it started coming more like a performance thing. like where we would just sit down and he would start playing some drums and I would start playing keys and then he'd be playing bass on top of that and we would just sort of improvise something. And that just sort of evolved and flowed. And I really liked that approach. And then sort of during the pandemic really, and as that was evolving, was trying to incorporate that approach in my own music, and just sort of trying to do all the parts or line them all up and then perform them, as opposed to just working with this recording that I already had, so to speak. So that's sort of how the process evolved, in a nutshell. Yeah, it was very try to mimic more the music that interests me or the collaborative stuff that comes from working with other people.
So who would you cite as musical influences? Was there an album or a genre? I mean, what was really getting you moving in that direction, inspiring you?
I would say a big, like, as far as like similar to the music that I make, I would say Madlib and like Yesterday's New Quintet kind of stuff was very like, I just really dug that stuff. But ultimately, I think the huge change for me was it, like, I was into the Sun Ra Orchestra and like that kind of spiritual jazz and stuff like that. But my partner curated an exhibit at the art museum and the orchestra came out and I got to meet Marshall Allen and Danny Thompson and all these guys who played with Sun Ra, and just hearing them talk about their approach and the way that he approached the music and the reasons he approached it that way. One of the main things was basically like, nature doesn't repeat itself, so why should I? And that just really resonated with me as far as like, I don't know, I had grown to be kind of tired of just pressing a button and a beat played that I had already made. So I wanted to sort of incorporate ways that it was much harder for me to play sort of the same idea twice, you know. I can play something along those lines, but it'll be different every time, which I prefer, sort of.
So what was the first live show that you ever saw that blew you away?
Probably the Roots in Philly.
What was it about the show? What really got you?
I honestly, I'm trying to think of which one I saw first. I saw them a bunch of times because they did a lot of free shows in Philly. It was just the way I was used to being, like I said, I grew up listening to hip hop, and there's a lot of ways in which people perform live hip hop that is not really, doesn't sound great a lot of times, or at least at that time. And just the way that they were approaching it was just so like musical and just so like dynamic. It had a big effect on me. They were pretty much my favorite band growing up. So that also helped to, know most of their material. But that was one thing that was also rang true with the way that they performed. It was built in a way, because they were a band, could be different every time that they played, and they could incorporate all these different things. Like Black Thought was always rapping about stuff that he would just bust into like a freestyle and start talking about current events or different things that were like relating to the moment, and that it just always felt cool.
I guess my question to you with the debut, this is the voice getting out to the world. Is there added pressure? What are you hoping the listener gets from what you put out there, and kind of how this sets the tone for what you do from here on out artistically?
I don't really feel a lot of pressure. I'm excited for people to hear it, and I think that I ultimately feel really good about what I'm doing and like following myself, and so I sort of find a lot of strength in that. And if it resonates with people, then that's like even better, and that's great. And I think it will, honestly, with a lot of people. But I also know that, like, if I keep following myself, that's like the important thing as far as continuing to grow artistically and stuff like that. And one thing that I'm sort of thinking about, and it's probably too early to even talk about like this kind of thing, but it's my music is always changing, and I already feel like my music is different than what this album is. And that's not to say anything one might be better or worse or anything like that. It's just my approach is just continuously evolving. I think people will like this, but I just hope that they don't have an expectation that like my music is going to sound like this going forward. You know, it's just, it'll be something like this, and it's going to continue to evolve and grow. And so I'm honestly just like following myself. So I feel good about it. And the peers and my peers around me in the community that I really trust and admire. And so, yeah, it feels good.
So, you know, every day you wake up, you get the chance to create. You're a professional musician. What's the best part of this process for you? What do you look forward to the most?
Those feelings when you stumble into something that really sounds different, and I just really, like, when I really feel myself. The thing I strive for is this listening experience ultimately, that can take you to this place that feels like it's between your lucid like awakeness and between the dream world. It's like this like semi-conscious state that I find myself in when I'm really listening to music I enjoy. And I can get there when I'm performing sometimes, and when I'm creating music. And so that's what I'm sort of striving for there. But ultimately, like, if my music can put like me in a place like that, and anyone else, that would be a bonus. But especially like if I can feel that, when I feel that, it just feels great, and feels like a connection to something much deeper that sort of gives me comfort when thinking about like all the turmoil and challenge of this life in, you know, this physical life, you know. So ultimately it's kind of like a spiritual experience that, like, when I'm performing and when I'm really immersed in the music, that I'm sort of chasing all the time.
If you could get into a jazz DeLorean or music DeLorean, so to speak, and go see a dream show anywhere, who would you go see?
There's just so many. I'm really about. I used to think about this because I collect records. I have a ton of records, and I get really into time periods and sort of like places that these like musical revolutions were happening, sort of how they coincide with other artistic and political revolutions. Some good examples would be Jamaica in the 60s as rocksteady was evolving and becoming reggae. Or I really was into like the evolution of like bossa nova and how jazz was incorporated into Brazilian music over there, and would have been really interested to check that out. And then of course all the evolutions and incarnations of like, I was thinking the other day how crazy it would have been to see like Miles Davis or Coltrane or some of these jazz guys that you hear these recordings and they're always the same every time you hear the recording. You see a jazz band play an album and it's totally different, and it's such a different experience than listening to the album. And so just sort of like extrapolating that on how much I enjoy, you know, I don't know, Joe Henderson or Coltrane or Sun Ra or all these guys, preferably like late 60s and this early 70s, when some of those cats were getting into the electric stuff. It's my thing. And then I'm kind of like a time period guy, but it's interesting because I found that sort of feels like I'm in one here in Portland right now that feels important. There's a lot of people doing stuff that feels like really different. And but the big thing is that people are really collaborative in their approach. So it leaves the door open for really new, cool things to happen that you might not expect. So that's been really inspirational, cool to be a part of.
Everyone has a perception of you. Your family, your friends, your fans, but ultimately you live your life, you're in control. Who do you think you are?
I think I am a father and a teacher and a healer, but also a student. Yeah, like a conduit of energy that we call music, and I think it's something that really relates deeply to all of us and all things like throughout the universe. And it's I think we all have it, but probably how I
dig it.
define myself.
This has been wonderful, man. Hey, thanks for opening up. Good luck with the debut and the single and live shows, man. I appreciate you taking time out.
All right, thanks.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in Portland, Philadelphia, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. Thanks to Brown Calvin for his time, music, and cool. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. And for all things Joe Domino, joedomino.com, and there you can kick in a little bit via Patreon or PayPal. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.